Hey everybody, Jay Shalansky here from the Fifth Trooper Network. I just want to take a moment to thank you for checking out this show. Did you know that over at thefifthtrooper.com we have tons of other content, including blogs, other podcasts, all kinds of stuff. In addition, if you want access to exclusive content, you can join us on patreon.com/thefifthtrooper and join at any level and you'll get access to exclusive blog articles, access to our private Discord, and much more. So please check us out, and thank you so much for all your support.
Welcome to the Fifth Trooper Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Fifth Trooper Podcast. I'm Jay Shalansky. That's Tim Hannon. This is still a podcast, and we're still here.
We're still here.
Despite our best efforts.
We're pushing them out. Look at that. Just churning out content for the sake of content. Clearly.
Yeah. That's why I do this.
That's right.
So, I'm really excited. I want some cool topics to talk about today, and one of them the main one, and most of the podcast will be about Adepticon and the worlds coming up, and then also we're going to transition into terrain. Today we're not going to really talk too much about. We're not going to do mailbag or lists from our Patreon, but that's okay. We'll pick that back up next week.
Yep. I was gonna say stick with it, folks, because we'll come back to it.
Yeah,
it's not gone forever.
And so basically, what's going on is this past weekend, I flew out to Adepticon headquarters. Just so everyone knows, I'm not going to be playing in Worlds because I'm actually helping at Adepticon. I'm going to help with tables and setting up, and then also I might be doing some demos and stuff for WizKids. So I'm going to be working, basically the whole weekend. But this past weekend, I went out to Adepticon headquarters to help figure out what tables they had, because I don't know if you guys have noticed, but there's going to be a lot of players at Worlds, and now there's going to be even more.
Mm-hmm. Got an increase.
Yeah,
so a well-needed increase.
Yeah, I think it was 250 or something like that, or 250.
Yeah, that sounds right.
252. And now it's up to 270, I think they've increased it to, which is great, right? Don't get me wrong. 270 players for Worlds for Legion is not something I thought we would see.
We're only 5 years old, like people forget, or 5 or 6, whatever, but,
right.
Yeah,
and we're starting to get numbers like Warhammer gets, right? And they've been around for 20 years, so more 40 years,
30 40
years, something like that. So so that's great. But and this is why I want to talk about it. I think one of the things people don't realize is the difference between Adepticon and AMG. So AMG is the one that owns the game, and they help to put on Worlds, but it falls to Adepticon as they're the one responsible for actually making sure it happens. And one of those responsibilities is terrain and tables, and making sure that there's enough and that it's decent, and and so the Adepticon team, for several weeks have had people over every weekend for paint teams, they call them. They are printing 3D terrain and then having teams come up to paint them to make sure we have enough tables and terrain for our worlds, which is amazing. And it's so much work. It's so much work.
It's a lot of work. I mean, just the printing alone is a lot of work.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the printers are the ones doing work, but still, if anyone who has a 3D printer, I don't have one, but I've had many friends that do, and I know how they work. It's still not a labor-free process.
No, you got to babysit it.
Yeah, you got to babysit it and stick with it.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you have to do, and so and then on top of that, once it's printed and some of it needs to be glued together, right? Then it needs to be painted. So, that falls on, basically.
And well, I was gonna say, and also not for nothing, I think you really want terrain painted well. I actually think you want terrain painted better than your armies normally. because you can have, kind of like a crappy army, and that's fine. People, sometimes people chuckle at it, whatever. Um, but I know just from my own experience, I have one table. I always joke about making another one. Actually, it's very labor intensive, but I really enjoyed it. But all that to
Yep.
say, my best paint jobs by far are the ones that are on my terrain pieces. Especially there's certain pieces come to mind, but as a whole, the terrain, it took me forever to paint, but I took my time with it and I painted it and made it look good so that now there's different critiques sometimes of like
Yep.
how you set it up and whatnot, and that's fine. We can get into that, but just having it look nice is so crucial,
Yes.
even just from a marketing standpoint, right? If you're talking about, we always talk a lot about like the local community and local scene. You want good looking terrain because people, it catches your eye, especially
Right.
if you have if you're playing a game like a round or whatever where you have a whole bunch of troopers in the field and you don't have anything that's like super eye catching on the unit side. What's going to catch the eye? The terrain. So you really want to paint it well. So it's a lot of work.
Yes. Yeah. It really is. And I just feel, like I just feel like people don't really appreciate, like, just imagine you at home putting together one table, and now you've got to put together 136,
Yeah, at
right? And if
least,
right,
at
and if
least.
we
Yeah,
look at if we look at last year's, uh there, I think they had like 64 tables altogether last year.
yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
So over double the amount of tables for this year.
And just to clarify, because I'm sure someone's going to ask, why did he say at least? Because in my mind, if at all possible, you always like to have a couple extra, either
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
tripping out or, God
Well,
forbid
and
something breaks or
I'll say very
whatever. Yeah,
confidently that out of the 64, I think 30, 40 of them were actually fifth. Ours was mine,
yeah,
and some were mine and some were Nick Bodnar's. So
sure. Yeah,
so so though Adepticon has a ton of terrain,
yeah,
they still don't have enough, right, to fulfill, to do what
yeah.
needs to be done
It
for this.
it takes a massive community effort
Right.
to get it ready to go. And I think that is actually one of the nice things about Worlds. Again, like you said, a lot of people don't understand it. But even though I'm not the one bringing tables, I still have lots of friends that do, whether it's you or
Yeah.
Nick or whoever. Like it is a community effort to get this
Yeah.
going, to get this together. And
Well,
and it's
and
also to make sure it's set up effectively too.
yeah, well, and part of the problem with that, with a community effort like that too, is right, making sure, like, I know that Nick and mine and Adepticon, now I know Adepticon's tables are all decent and good for playing Legion on, right? But like when you're trying to like parse and like put together tables, like it's really tough to have 20 good tables, let alone hundreds. So, I think the Adepticon team, like I said, I flew out there to help them understand what they had, what a good table looks like for Legion. And basically I went through 50, 60 tables over the weekend. Or no, actually more
Yeah,
than that, almost 90 tables. Some of them were still, the reason I'm like having struggling is some of them were in the process of being printed and some were in the
sure.
process of being painted and some had just been painted. And so
Yeah,
like though, and then I had to go to their warehouse to go through all the totes of terrain that have already been done to see what's there and how many
right.
pieces, what how many tables we could get out of it and make sure that it had, enough cover and enough this and with the new rules the way that they are, certain things aren't as important anymore, such
Yeah.
as scatter. It's good to have scatter, but it's
So
not as good.
we can discuss that, but I
Okay. Oh,
disagree with that. But I see what you're
here's
saying.
okay.
Yes.
Hold on before you disagree.
Yeah, we
Let
don't
me
have to
give you
go
my
down that
cat.
road
Let
yet.
me give you my caveat.
Okay,
Scatter is good if it has a base.
fair.
So I can have a bunch of like barrels or boxes or whatever, but it needs some sort of an outline to give it an area so that you can say that this is, because the problem that happens when you just have one box
Mm-hmm.
is with the new cover rules and the line of sight drawing, depending on what you've given that as a cover, it becomes very difficult to judge the cover.
Okay.
Or you may think you have cover, but then I all of a sudden have some crazy, because it's just this weird
Right.
little piece of scatter. Now I have a line on you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
but creating an outline for it, and I think we're getting to this in Legion in general, is uh, any like buildings that have some weird like edging and stuff, like they all need some sort of a base to give it an
Yeah.
outline to say, hey, this is where the terrain starts and ends, like is these lines, so that we
Sure.
can
Sure.
identify it a little bit more.
I see what you're
Especially,
saying.
because the way terrain works now is instead of drawing a single line from middle to middle, right? You're basically shining a light and you're watching the beam go, and if the beam touches, the other character, I have line of sight, and if the beam is obscured at
Right.
all by the terrain, they have cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when doing that with things that have raggedy edges,
Hmm.
or it's hard to determine that, right? But if you
Yeah.
can say, okay, basically turn this thing not into a cube, but into a shape that you can easily recognize, and you can say,
Yeah.
oh, here's the line to this. That's where we're gonna make sure we see the terrain.
Yeah. I think, and here's where my part of it is in my experience. I think the best thing that we had when we were doing tables, especially in Knoxville, was someone had I think it was Scott made this basically box of scatter boxes, but those were boxes. So those are easy to define as far as like shapes inside. Like you can, even though they don't have bases technically, you can still easily say like, okay, these three boxes or whatever, like these are all one
Yeah,
one unit or whatever. It was easy to have those discussions, and that was great to throw on a table. But I see what you're talking like when you start to get into like jaggedy rocks and things like that and outcroppings and well, my chest is blocked by the top part of the rock, but my bottom's not, and yeah, it gets messy. I get
yeah.
it.
Well, and it's just yeah, and so trying to simplify that, especially at a world's level, because we want judge calling to be relatively straightforward. We want
Sure.
people to be able to move quickly through their games, and when you have clear designations of what things are,
Yeah.
it makes that process easier. So,
Oh yeah.
so anyways, yeah, they have, you know, Adepticon has invested so much time, money, blood, sweat, tears, everything, into not only Legion, but all the other games they have there. But, it's just so wonderful to see. And I wanted to share it with everybody. It's just how much work, and I mean, they've got people that these people have full-time jobs, right? And they're coming on the weekend to paint Legion terrain so that we can have a Worlds and have a good Worlds. And it's not that they're just like painting any old terrain. Like they have a whole process to make sure that everything is beautifully done to a standard so that it actually looks good on the table.
Yeah. This is not like some rush amateur job.
No.
Yeah, it takes time, it takes care. And I think that is it's the double-edged sword or one of the double-edged swords, I think, of Legion, where it's great because we have beautiful terrain and really interesting and unique terrain.
Yes.
But the trick of that, compared to like Warhammer or like 40K and stuff like that, and I'm not knocking 40K's terrain because I actually think a lot of 40K terrain works great for what it needs to do. It gets its job done and it's very thematic, whatever. But their terrain is a little more straightforward. And so the flip side of having this beautiful terrain is having to set it up and make sure it's set up in a way that makes sense. And like you said, like when your judges are coming in, especially if you have judges coming in that maybe didn't help set it up,
Right.
which happens. I mean, especially
Yep.
an event this size, it's going to happen. It's
I
inevitable.
can well,
And
I can
so,
tell you
yeah,
right now it's absolutely not going to happen because I know who's coming to set up, and when most of the judges are going to be there. So yeah,
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. But like, not every
yeah,
judge is necessarily going to have the same insight on the tables and
yeah,
everything. But
exactly.
they need to be able to look at it and say, okay, this is that, and it needs to make some common sense while still being beautiful. So
Yeah,
it's again double-edged sword. It's really beautiful. It's really fun. It's really neat. It's really unique, but it's also really tricky to set up effectively.
yeah, yeah, and it's it's just such a great thing, and I wanted to shine a light on that, and also wanted to talk about the fact that we're increasing uh to a larger number now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think that's a big deal. I think have they made I didn't check, I'm sorry, but have they made any adjustments towards having a side event or anything like that? Because I said they might have added some stuff, but again, I didn't look at the whole release. I was at
Yeah,
work
I
and
didn't look at the whole
time,
release.
sorry.
I've just been focused on the Worlds event. But yeah, I know
Yeah.
that they've added more events, but that could have been
Yeah.
for anything
That could be a
at
million
the point.
things. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
For sure.
Marvel Crisis Protocol.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I think it's gonna be. I honestly believe that this is going to be the first real world that. Well, let me. How do I want to say that? This is going to be the first large scale real worlds that we've had. I think that's
I think
different from
mhm.
any other tournament that we've had.
And I think, and this is not at all a diss to Last Worlds because I think Last Worlds was great too, but I think this is the first Worlds that has really essentially like worked the way you would want an OP structure to work. Not to say that it went
Yeah,
seamlessly or that there's never any issues, and but that's another discussion. But what I mean is, we had a season from start to finish, one season, not 3 years spread over a pandemic. It was
yeah,
one season competitively. Here's all your invites that are out in the wild, whatever, and boom, there you go. So it's
yeah,
one again. You can discuss how it went to hell and back, but at the end of the day, it's been one season, and now we have one Worlds after one season, which
yeah,
is great.
yeah. And I think Adeptic or LVO is probably the only other event
Yeah,
that is even close to this big. And I don't think how many players were at LVO this past year.
I think we had 190, not counting judges and staff and everything. So figure 200 with staff and
Yeah, so
change.
yeah,
Don't quote me on
almost
that, just off the
right.
top of my head.
But let's say 190 players, so we're almost 100 more players
Yeah,
at
that's huge.
Adepticon.
Yeah,
And I mean,
that's
and I
huge.
think I really believe that there's even more invites out there than people that are coming.
Oh yeah. I mean, we know that. We know that people have, I mean, that's just life, right?
Right.
And again, I think there is a temptation you could do some rough math and say, okay, there were this many world qualifiers or not world qualifiers, excuse me,
Right.
but store champs that had invites and world qualifiers. Those are two separate things. Let's say those were, there are this many events and there are this many invites out there. Absolutely.
Yep.
But bear in mind, just because of life, for no, you know, big discussion or like, oh, I hate the state of the game or blah blah blah. Just life
Yeah.
gets in the way, and so people can't make it. So people
Right.
with invites can't always make it. So yeah, it's always interesting to see how many are quote unquote in the wild versus how many make it. That's also why the last chance qualifier is always important, right? Because then
Yep.
people inevitably, even last minute, will cancel, and then people get
Yeah.
essentially drafted out of the last chance qualifier to go in, which is a great mechanic, by the way. I love that. I'm not going because I don't trust my ability to get that high enough up to get there. But yeah, I still think it's a great mechanic for people to have
Yeah.
and to make sure that we're utilizing all those tables and fill in that space.
Yeah, I agree. And I think so my understanding is it won't be there'll be a good number of people. I don't know how many it's gonna be. If I had to guess, it'd probably be like four from the last chance qualifier will make it in. I'm not sure, but I think that's I think
Yeah.
last chance qualifier is great. That's going to be Thursday, and I think that's what 64 players or something like that.
I think I don't know. I don't think last year they did like at least top eight or something made it in.
Yeah,
But
maybe it's
again,
8. I don't
but
know.
well, and here's the thing too. I actually would say we still take that with a grain of salt because inevitably people, like I said, people are going to last minute flights will get
Yeah,
canceled,
right.
things will happen, crap happens, life happens. And so even if it's top eight, top 16, whatever, inevitably they'll get more than that. So if you're, it's a little bullet point. If you're playing last chance qualifier and it's top eight only are going up and you're like number 9 or number 10, don't go anywhere because you'll probably still end up getting in, most likely.
Yeah.
Just pure odds of it. Um, but yeah, but and getting to play whether you're playing last chance or the official worlds like worlds, you're going to get to play on some beautiful tables. But I think the other thing, and we want to talk about this too, is trying to balance a beautiful table versus a competitive table,
Yeah.
and it's really tricky. It's really
Yeah.
tricky.
And I think actually Thursday, I think there's more than, I think it's like almost 200 people maybe playing on Thursday too. So, I don't know. It's wild. And I think, unfortunately, I think the problem is separating AMG from Adepticon again, right? And I know that people on the Discord have been getting frustrated over the changes and like how things are being changed. And I
Sure.
think the
Yeah. Yeah.
problem is, you know, you put out these invites, and as this AMG's first year really doing this on their own without pulling in all the invites from other
Right.
years, right?
Right.
Like you already
Exactly.
said. And I think they're still working through the process. So I think the problem is as more people register or want to register and go, wait, I have a world's invite. I didn't get to register yet. Like
Right.
they had
Right.
to increase that number and go, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
we're letting
Yeah.
you in now. Um,
I No, I was just gonna say I am really excited. So, this has been a good, interesting thing to see how this OP season has worked and everything like that. I'm really actually arguably more interested in next season
yeah,
to see what is adjusted because again, now that we've had a full season and we're getting back to some, knock on fake wood here, we're getting back to some normalcy here. I can't ever say that word. I'm sorry, normalcy or
normals,
normal normal
normalist,
life. How about that? There you go.
normalized,
Normal SC. Is there an extra A in
normalcy,
there? Anyway, normalcy. Anyway,
numeralcy,
normalcy.
normal,
But we're getting
normal.
back to this sense of normality. How about that? And getting back into like a regular play structure that like what we had. And so
Yeah,
I think now moving forward, regardless of how this world goes, frankly, it'll be really curious to see what adjustments are made
yeah,
for next season.
yeah, for
So
sure.
I'm looking forward to Adepticon, even though I won't be able to make it. I'm still going to be paying close attention to it, and I'm looking forward to also to next season already.
Yeah,
Just to see what that brings.
I think it'll bring joy and happiness.
Nothing but joy. We'll never have any anger about it, and only joy will be had by all.
So I guess at the end of the day, what my ask here is, I know I've been talking a lot about this and like how much I love Adepticon and I love all the people that run it. And so I guess my big ask for you guys out there is if you find yourself getting frustrated at the ever-changing environment that has been happening with the Worlds event, uh, it is not Adepticon's fault. And they are doing the best that they can, and it's not AMG's fault, really. It's just how it's being done, right? Like, and the fact that there's so many players and the fact that some aren't registering till now, right, is a problem. And like,
Yeah,
there's all these like layers of complexity of running a huge event. And I'm sorry, everyone, as much love and affection and time and willingness that Adepticon is putting into Legion, it's not the only game there. It's not even the only
right.
game with a world's championship there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
It's you look at the Adepticon logo. It's not a Legion logo.
yeah,
In case you missed that, it's not a Legion logo.
right.
You
Right.
know.
And I mean, they have like for those of you who maybe haven't gone to Adepticon and don't understand, let me just lay it out real quick. They have painting, uh, they do painting, they do awards. They have a whole a showcase, not just AMG showcases. They have the Golden Demons, which are like a very prestigious
It's the
uh
best award you can get in painting.
painting
Argue. I mean,
award,
I'm sure someone out there is going to argue with me on that.
Yeah.
As far as the common nerd is concerned, it
It's one
is,
of the most
yeah,
prestigious awards you could get as a
exactly.
miniature painter.
There you
They
go.
have hell, Kill Team had an entire room where they did laser tag for
Yeah.
to promote Kill Team. They
Oh yeah.
have board games. They have a vendor floor. WizKids has got Onslaught, and they've got some other games
Hmm.
they're going to be previewing at Adepticon, like
Yeah.
uh Star Trek Into the Unknown, which is it is not, I'm going to say this very clearly. It is not like X-Wing and Armada,
Okay.
but it's the closest analog I can give you to what
Sure.
Star Trek Into the Unknown is.
Sure. Yeah, yeah.
It's Star Trek. But anyways,
It's
you
Star
know,
Trek with Elsa at the helm, but yeah, I got
right.
you.
So there's a ton of other stuff going on, right? And so just please keep that in mind and hold your hatred inside if you can.
Yeah, listen, no, hold your hatred until you go to therapy, y'all. There you go.
So
Save the therapist. Damn.
yeah, so with that, one of the things that came out of this weekend, for me was the fact that I got really engaged with terrain. It's been a long time since probably summer, since I was really had been excited about terrain, and that was because of Ewoks, and then my interest in Ewoks kind of waned a little bit.
Yeah,
And it's starting to come back. I got them out and I was looking at all the what, because I custom built all the like bases
sure.
and everything for all the models. And so I was looking at them again, and they're gonna come back out. But part of it was terrain is probably, out of all the things, hobby is my favorite thing about Legion and any of these miniature games, and terrain in
Yeah,
particular is probably one of my favorite things. And so to
yeah,
have a whole weekend that was like looking at terrain and getting terrain ready and painting some terrain and like just doing terrain stuff,
yeah.
I got very excited, and I'm bringing a number of tables of my own to Adepticon, as I have for the last 3 or 4 since Legion's been going on at Adepticon. I've had tables there every year, and
Yeah.
I'm expanding my tables, and one of them is a Scarif. And so
Mm.
Tim wanted me to show this on. So if you're watching on the
Yes,
video, so
yes.
here's the thing. This may look like a palm tree and a little thing of sand, but what
Yep.
I recommend,
Which we've seen
right?
tons of Scarif tables do that kind of thing, right?
Not
Tons of
this
beach
good.
tables do
Look
it.
how good this looks. Come on.
Yes, Jay, yours is very good. There
Oh, wow. I don't like the attitude. Mine is really good.
you go. Yours is
Here's
really good. You're right.
Here's the creme de la creme. Are you ready?
Yeah, this is the big thing.
Boom. Trees are
Magnetic.
magnetized, so they come
Oh,
off the base easily for two reasons. One,
yes.
line of sight.
Yep.
Two, storage, so that my
Yep.
trees don't break.
Yep. Hear this, man. Please. All you terrain makers out there,
Yeah.
do that kind of thing. Either removable or magnetized, whatever. It makes it so much easier, and it makes it you can still make beautiful terrain, but also make it practical and make it
And
useful.
this is
And yeah,
specifically like if you have a building that's tall, it's fine. Just because if you could just pick the whole building up, that's okay, right?
sure. Yeah.
It's more stuff like this. So basically, for those of you
Yeah.
listening on audio, it's like a 2 inch by 3 inch little round with sand and then a tree on it, right? And I'm gonna have more like bushes and stuff on this. I'm not
Sure. Yeah.
done yet, but and maybe
Yeah.
some like boxes or whatever. But when this is done, you need to be able to, like, if this tree is in the way or if I'm having trouble seeing, I need to move
Mm-hmm.
this, or I need to get my head down here. And
Yeah.
I keep hitting this tree, right? So the fact
Yeah.
that it's magnetized just makes it easier to get to things.
Well, or and then, you and I both like our ATSTs. Think of like an
Yeah.
ATST. If it wants to move through it or maybe land on it, if it's a
Right.
KP or something like that,
Yeah.
you want to be able to stand on it. And if you're arguing, and of course this would come to a terrain discussion with your opponent beforehand, blah blah
Yep.
blah. Disclaimer there. But if that's what you're going to do and say that it is passable and it's just something that could be stood on, then it would be stupid to say the tree makes it so you can't stand on it
Right.
unless that's something like. It just makes it a non-issue where you can just say, okay, trees removed, boom. Because
Yep.
again, if it was an ATST actually coming through a little, not a thick forest, but like a little one tree, it's just gonna knock over the little palm tree.
Yeah.
So don't make it an issue
Right. Just
with your opponent or anything like
yeah,
that. Like just
it's easy to pull
makes
off
sense.
and put
Yeah.
back and boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
So
that's really in that one piece. Part of why I wanted to accentuate it is a example of a beautiful and pragmatic table piece
yeah. Thank you.
in a microcosm.
Well, and that is the toughest thing to do. And you can talk to any of the really good terrain makers, Sean Morris, Jim Martin, like any of those guys. Uh, listen, I'm sure there's more of you out there. And even the 3D, like the guys who do all the 3D work, Imperial Terrain, Legion Terrain, Multiverse, and everybody else that's out there. The hardest thing is to make beautiful terrain that's also practical. It's
Yep.
it's by far the hardest thing. And so when you
Yeah.
can do little things like that, I
Hmm.
mean, it's very simple. I built my train. I drilled a little hole. I drilled a hole in it. I put a magnet in there and I put a magnet on the bottom of my tree.
Yeah.
Now, it wasn't as easy as it sounds because magnets are real fun, especially earth magnets when they're really strong. There's a lot of complications, and then remembering which way the magnet goes before you
Sure.
super glue it on, like, is also
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm hoping to do with this whole piece, this whole table, is just
Yeah.
have it be beautiful and practical at the same time. And one of the big
Yeah.
things that always happens with Scarif tables that I find, right, is that this is not having only a bunch of these and then the bunker, or like having a bunch of these and then a giant plane is not
Hmm.
really practical to Legion.
No. No,
Um,
it's not.
and so
No.
one of the things I'm doing with this is I have the downed ATST from Legion Terrain. And since
Sure.
I mean, they weren't ATSTs, they were AT whatever. uh,
All-terrain super transports.
Yeah,
It's not what,
what
it's not
was
what they're called.
the
But yeah.
Scarif AT? Um
It was the AT-AT, but it was like a cargo AT-AT. But anyway,
yeah, it was a different
if we're gonna get
ATAC,
technical
an
about it.
ATACT. So
Right,
instead of
because it
an
was
eight,
cargo.
so
That's
Legion Terrain has an a downed ATAT. I'm going to use that on the table because it's close enough for me,
yeah,
at
yeah.
this point. Um, I could also get ambitious. I found an old beat up Kenner ATAT,
Yep.
which is the
I know
exact
what you mean.
size. And so I might Dremel that and build my own because I think that would
Yeah.
be fun. It
Oh,
just
yeah.
depends on how much time I have. Because
Yeah.
this Scarif table, everything's going to be well, for the most part, hand built. These aren't even 3D printed. These are model trees that I
Oh yeah.
have,
Cool with that.
that I completely stripped and painted and primed.
Yeah.
But I'm going to try to hand build as much as I can, custom build. No 3D files. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but no 3D files on this table. It's just a choice I'm making, and then
Yeah.
maybe trying to take that Kenner ATST and Dremel it and bust it apart and build a train piece out of that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Well,
do you remember that there was that battle report? I forgot who did it early on, and they had built that whole Legion table with like with the Kenner downed AT-AT. Oh
no, I
my
don't
God,
think
it was
so. I've
beautiful.
probably seen it. I just don't
Yeah,
recall.
I gotta remember who did it, but yeah, it was amazing. But yeah, so anyway, so I'm doing that. I'm doing I think they call it Marin City Imperial Terrain, but it's
Yeah.
Theed. It's
Yeah.
basically Naboo
Sure.
Theed.
Sure.
I have a bunch of those 3D printed files that I've had or actual the actual prints are done, and I've had them for a long time. So I've primed all those and put them all together, and I've got some other special stuff I'm going to do on the table. So I have two tables that I'm going to be. I want to try to go for three before Adepticon, but we'll
Okay.
see. We'll see. I'm going to
Yeah.
run out of time. I can already feel it, but you know,
So speaking of tables, I do want to spend at least just a few moments talking about like when someone at home is making their tables, not so much like what terrain have you
yeah,
physically made, like what are your trees magnetized, although you should, again, if you can do it. But what I mean is like when you're throwing terrain on a table to make it a good balance of pretty and also hopefully competitive slash just balance it, maybe not competitive, but and listen, over the years of Legion, there has been a plethora of
mm,
table construction content, so we don't have to completely go over everything.
yeah,
But just I think a brief overview would be really good to go back over, especially now, like you say, with updated rules and things like that. Because I think some people still hold on to this idea of the like the 30% rule or something like that, and I just don't think it's an outdated way of looking at it, frankly. But yeah, I think there's my big thing, and I'm sure you probably have your own big items, but my biggest thing, I think, when I see people making tables, people leave the middle of their tables so open, so open. And now, caveat, side note, what I don't mean is please don't put a massive line of sight blocker as your middle point because
yeah,
that's also a problem. Because then you
yeah,
play Ring Around the Rosie. Like if it's a KP, I always think of KP. I did that at Gen Con one year where I played a KP where my Vader, and his Luke just went around in a circle and we couldn't even do anything to each other. We just running in circles.
yeah,
Anyway, miserable. So I don't mean that. But what I mean is you can have just like a little piece of terrain in the middle. Okay, sure, whatever. But around the middle,
yes,
is to have at least one, maybe two medium-sized to large line of sight blockers in there.
hmm,
So that if you're playing a list that wants to run up on the middle, it's not just, oh, I hope my opponent doesn't have a gun line.
right,
Because
right,
otherwise, just to be real honest, even though I don't play as rebels, I still want them to have a fair fight. And
yeah,
it's not a fair fight to rebels if you don't have that kind of terrain because otherwise it's just you get blown off the middle point. And as an Imperial player, if I see an open table in the middle and there's a middle point, I just know that I don't have to
yeah.
capture that middle point. I don't have to bother until mid game because I can just blow you away and then get
So
it.
Kyle from Scoundrels just wrote an article last week that's on our on our blog about terrain
Mm,
and what looks and he recommends 6 to 8 line of sight blocking buildings
yes,
to go on the table. He
yes,
prefers 8, but he said you could do 6 if you have other things going on. So
yeah,
that's a really good point. And I highly
yeah,
recommend reading his blog post about it. And we've done a few of
yeah,
these and we update them every time like a bunch of new stuff and new rules come out. But
yeah, yeah,
you know, designing a table not to be just like you know, highly competitive ready, but
yeah.
also to be um, you know, just
Be
playable.
balanced. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you want it to be. And side note, before you keep going, balance does not mean mirrored on both sides. Which is another thing that
Right.
should be said.
Yeah.
So like if you have a building in the middle and then on the side, you don't then have to just perfectly mirror that on the other side. Like, but
Right.
a feeling of balance without being mirrored is important too. Sorry, carry on.
No, no, no. That's all good. That's you know, that's
No.
basically what I was saying. It's not about being competitive. It's just about being like good, you know, so
Yeah.
that everyone has a good time.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
You want your units that are doing cool things. And again, I'm thinking the middle of the table, but it really applies to anywhere on the table, but especially in the middle, because most games of Legion tend to be fought a lot in the middle,
Yep.
which is fine. I'm good with that. But when your middle is kind of lacking terrain, again, it's a gun line wins, like just
Right.
straight up. It you could arguably have a better list than your opponent, but if your opponent has a more gun line list and you're on an open table, you're just gonna get blown away.
Yeah.
And it's not fun. Again, it's not about being competitive. It's just about being fun. It's just not fun to play. It's not fun to walk into a table, look at this, and so, oh, Okay, well, that's game. Like,
Yeah.
okay, like we're gonna
Yeah.
play it out. We're gonna try my best. I'm still gonna play it, but like, I don't love this. This is not great.
Right.
And there's listen, especially in a big event like Adepticon, like LVO, anything like that, you're going to have ebbs and flows of some tables are going to be maybe a little bit more heavy terrain, some people are a little bit lighter, some tables are going to be a little bit whatever, sparse. So
Yeah.
there's going to be some natural ebbs and flows of that, but the
Yeah.
hope is that the majority of them are balanced enough to maintain that like baseline.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. And
I
and
think
I
I
think
think
we
scatter is still
all
important too.
it takes time. It takes time to get there too. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like
Oh
it's
yeah.
not something that's going to happen overnight. It's not
Yeah.
something and you got to play and I think we all made mistake. I mean, I did this with not just Legion, but also with MCP. Like before I even started playing MCP, I was just so excited about playing that I built this entire New York City terrain like table.
Yeah.
And I had my buddy Nick come over and he goes, "Yeah, this is unplayable." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, we could pick things up and throw things. We need line
Yeah.
of sight. This is treated as one big piece of line of sight, but you can go
Yep.
underneath it. So that doesn't make any sense for this game." And I'm like, "Oh," he goes, "Listen, dude, it's beautiful. It's
Right.
unplayable though."
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and
and but I mean
go
it's
ahead.
playable like at home. Like if I wasn't planning on actually going to tournaments and like being part of like a more competitive scene, it wouldn't have mattered, right? I could have just done it at home. We could have had homebrew, but the fact that like I was trying to actually really learn the game and try to play the game, like he was like, "Yeah, there's nothing we can do about this."
Yeah. Well, and I think it really, if you're gonna take this advice home and start, looking at how am I gonna build a table for my local community, local store, what have you, or just for myself, whatever. I think a really good rule of thumb to start with is to start with objects that you already own,
Yeah,
like household objects. It might look silly. I understand that. This is not your final product. This is your
right.
rough draft. And normally, honestly, a lot of different sized cardboard boxes, and use those and play around those. Maybe play like half of a match. You don't have to play a whole game or nothing like that, but use those as a rough outline before you spend however much money or time or effort on making a whole beautiful, nice table,
Yeah,
because you don't want to make a beautiful table and then not be able to use half of it, like you're saying.
right.
So use your household items, use your cardboard, your paper towel rolls, your whatever you have to
Yep,
make your rough outline, take a picture of it, and then start planning out, okay, I could take away this box and I could make this into a rock instead. Or I could, maybe it's a rock, take away a rock and make it into another piece of terrain, or I start supplementing things with other real things. But use that as a rough outline before you totally commit and then realize, oh, I've made something that's unplayable.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
And
I
also
think
read Kyle's blog.
I think those are all great points.
Yeah.
But yeah, all right. Well, I don't know. I feel like that's pretty good. What do you
Yeah.
think?
That's fun. Go to Adepticon, sign up, go to the cool events. There's a bunch of events you can go
Yeah,
to.
there's
Yeah.
tons of stuff
There's
going on.
tons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
highly recommend.
Yeah. It's a great time.
It really is.
Truly.
All right. Well, cool. Let's wrap it up, I guess, huh?
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
cool. Thanks everybody for listening again.
Yeah.
Be kind to all the
Organizers.
organizers of all shows, not just
Yeah.
the Dipcon, but of all of them. So,
That's
you
right.
know. All right.
That's right.
Well,
May you always roll hot. There you go.
yeah, right.
Yeah. May you always roll hot and may your terrain always be of good quality. There you go. Just
Yeah.
your Legion goodbye.
Love it. All right, but buddy. All right, buddy.
All right, buddy, old pal.
Sorry, somebody
Not
like
your-
messaged me and I got distracted. All right.
I'm not your buddy guy.
Anyways, thanks everybody for listening. Thanks Tim for being on again, and we'll see you
Always.
guys next week.
See you.
Join us next week for another edition of the Fifth Trooper podcast.
This has been a Fifth Trooper production.